Health and Power Through Creation by Paul Ellsworth. Chapter 2, The Divine Mind. By the time you have reached this chapter, there is one protest you will make if you are going to make it at all. The world is full of imperfect people. The virtuous ones are often invalids and the healthy ones paupers. Do you belong to the school that tries to cure an evil by denying it or ignoring it? No, imperfection and limitation are real enough. They exist, but they need not continue in the life of any individual after that individual has learned the truth about himself. Every human being is potentially perfect. Lack and appearance of imperfection are the results of one or more of three elements. First, misdirected energy. Second, dormant life and faculties. Third, belief in a set of superstitions which may be called race lies. The first and second of these elements of failure will be considered later. Let us determine now how a man's belief in a lie can affect him. Does his belief change the truth? It does in relation to his life. The fact is that a man brings undesirable results into his life by an inverse use of the very power which, rightly used, would ensure his happiness and success. He is directing forces which he does not understand. Often he uses them without even recognizing them, and the results which follow this ignorant use seem to him to come from some malicious power outside of himself. Before we can understand the creative power of thought, however, we must get back to the origin of things and discover how man comes to be endowed with this wonder-working faculty. The answer to this problem lies in the nature of man himself. Man is the terminal, an expression of an inner and unseen life. Back of and within the individual lies a divine mind, and it is the power of this divine mind upon which man draws, whether he does so unconscious of its existence or whether he has learned the secret of his own nature and is able to work certainly and scientifically. Assured and abounding success is the result of recognizing this law of man's constitution and of living in harmony with it in every activity. Nature is another expression of this divine mind. Nature is not the original creative principle any more than is man. Nature's work is not always perfect by any means. The action of flood, pestilence, and tornado is an expression of her destructive tendency. And if these were not at times overruled by the divine life, which is always constructive and beneficent, the world would become a place of chaos. If man is an expression of divine life, why is he so limited in his power of attaining his wishes? The limitation lies in his recognition of his own nature. Here again, his thought is creative, and to the extent to which he recognizes his identity with the power back of all life and substance, he learns to manifest power, direct and unhampered. Let me put this into a more compact form. Man is a manifestation of a divine life. He is limited by his recognition of his true nature, for always and by the very law of his being, his thought has creative power. The water in the stream is in its attributes exactly like that in the spring from which it took its source. After you have mastered this secret, you will be able to see in the life about you plenty of illustrations of its workings. For instance, consider the matter of genius. A genius is a man who in whatever line he expresses himself does mightier works than his fellows. If he is a painter, he is a master painter, and there is an element of spontaneity in his work, which can never be added by mere desire or determination. He appears to work not from himself, but from some inner spring of power and mastery. Something greater than himself finds expression through him, and in his humble moments he knows that he is but the channel through which, flows a power infinitely greater than anything he recognizes in his little outer mind. Genius, however, is notably erratic. It may desert a man for long periods, during which he is of the same clay as the least proficient of his fellows. And the work done during these times of isolation from the creative power is no better than the work of other men. Sometimes, too, this quality of genius seems to be a veritable fire of the spirit, and the mortal through whom it finds expression is shaken and consumed into a premature old age. Evidently, this uncertain power is not what we are looking for, but as the element of mastery and perfection of expression exists in genius, perhaps we may find in it the key to the orderly use of the inner powers of man. If genius is the result of the direct outbreathing of the divine life which lies within each human being, why are its results so uncertain, and why does it not work through everyone? The answer is that divine mind, like electricity, has its laws, which must be fulfilled in every particular before it can be brought into orderly and satisfactory expression. These laws, which regulate the expression of the divine life, can best be understood by a fuller understanding of the nature of the divine life itself. And this understanding will be expedited by splitting the primal energy we are studying into its three basic rays. These rays, which unite to form the divine life back of man and nature, are wisdom, power, love. Every action partakes either positively or negatively of these three elements, for every action is the full or hampered expression or showing forth of this inner life. Power we easily recognize in every function and activity. It is that mysterious energy which arises out of the unseen and which scientists have vainly endeavored to explain by assuming that at some point in its evolution, matter, by a subtle change in vibration, became energy. Wisdom also is easily recognized. It is the directing force which guides the stars in their orbits and the blood in our veins, and it is either present in or absent from every voluntary action of men and nations. But love is looked upon as a period of madness which occurs in the life of young people, or as a more or less permanent softness of fiber encountered in sentimental individuals. What has love to do with anything practical? Love is the most practical thing in the world. Don't be alarmed. The kind of love I am preaching will break up neither your bank account nor your homes. It is rather the spirit which may be rudely illustrated by the organization of a big and harmonious working business. We hear much of teamwork and cooperation in modern life. Well, love is just teamwork carried to its logical conclusions and extended to take in the universe. It is not a mushy sentiment, but is a practical principle which teaches us to do effectively and enthusiastically our share of the world's work and to turn over to the divine life, which is working through us and our fellows, the task of coordinating and harmonizing our activities with the universal activity. Love teaches us that it is useless and unnecessary to oppose anything in the spirit of intolerance, and that undesirable conditions are changed by a serene cooperation with the universal creative spirit and a recognition of its perfection inherent in all things. Now, I am not going to ask you to accept this conclusion and all it implies at once. Think it over. Consider its applications in the pages which follow, and see if on acquaintance the idea does not become clearer and more practical. These changes of belief are a matter of growth, and all men will grow naturally and easily, provided they accept such light as comes to them and use it honestly. And don't jump to the conclusion that this love which I am describing will necessitate your giving up your life and desires and going out to be a missionary to the heathen. I said that it was a practical faculty, and so you will find it. It will not lead to a foolish indulgence of self or of others. It is a matter of teamwork carried to a little broader application than the ordinary. Love is harmony applied. It is the regulator of individual and universal circulation, and is therefore the secret of health and of abundance. Any departure from normal circulation in the body is followed by discomfort and eventually by disease. Congestion or depletion, too much or too little blood in a given part, will bring this departure from health. Mankind realizes this, but the thing it fails to see is that harmony of thought, which in its ultimate application is synonymous with love, is the great equalizer of the flow of blood, and that those emotions which are at variance with love, thoughts of hate, revenge, fear, lust, are the very elements of discord back of congestion, depletion, and their consequent functional and organic changes. This same principle applies in the world beyond a man's body. Absolute harmony of thought, which is based on the broad and impersonal love of divine life, is the natural equalizer of the financial circulation. Without it, a man may experience congestion and have money hoarded in the bank and houses and lands, which he has to guard from loss by theft and fire. Or he may suffer from depletion and lack of necessities of life. Either the one nor the other condition is normal and satisfactory. An abundant supply of every good thing is normal to man, and every man can bring himself into the normal circulation of the universal supply currents by quickening within himself the harmonizing power of love. He need not wait for the failure of those perennially reoccurring schemes of professional reformers, according to which selfishness is to be curbed by law in such a way that every man in the land may exert himself selfishly to a certain extent but no farther. These efforts have been made since before the time of recorded history. The only reform which will do away with misery and want is that reform which shall bring into activity within every man the harmonizing power of universal sympathy, and which shall turn over to the divine mind the work of coordinating the multitude of individual activities. Two practical applications of this supreme characteristic of the divine mind can be here made. First, anxiety about the future may be done away with in the life of any individual as soon as he or she recognizes the harmonizing and providing quality of the divine mind, and by the awakening of love comes under its perfecting care. Recognizing the divine life and cooperating with it by doing with enthusiasm the work it brings you to do is the sure way toward a radiant success. Time spent in looking anxiously toward the future is worse than wasted, for it tunes your whole being to a set of negative beliefs. The key to the future is the present. Use it honestly and earnestly, and keep the universal currents of supply flowing through you by the perfect action of love in your consciousness, and you will not need to foresee anything. The second application is an outgrowth of this. You cannot use the higher powers into whose knowledge you are soon to come to accomplish any unworthy deed. A thing is unworthy or wrong because it is not in harmony with the higher life, with the broad purposes of divine mind, because the divine mind knows that the accomplishment of the thing you contemplate would bring unhappiness rather than satisfaction. Manifestly, it is impossible for the individual to utilize divine life for purposes which it sees to be wholly unsatisfactory. Your guiding principles must be in harmony with the purposes of divine life, and then nothing can defeat you. We will consider this matter of desire later, and you will find that your real desires are always in harmony with good. In concluding this chapter, I want to call your attention to the light which these facts in regard to the divine life sheds upon some old and much abused words and phrases. One of the most abused of all these terms is the word prayer. What relation has the prayer idea to the divine mind? The same relation that the nervous system has to the muscles and to the brain. It is the means of communication between different parts of one vast organism. Man, the visible expression of an invisible cause, draws upon the energy and wisdom of this cause for his own needs. Prayer is never a supplication to an outside deity. It is the recognition by the individual of his own basic or natural perfection, and the acceptance of the good which this recognition ensures. God, divine life, is impersonal in the sense of including and harmonizing all personalities in one vast but perfectly coordinated whole. The divine life knows no anger, no jealousy. The name God has been applied to a limited conception of this all-embracing life, and to a certain extent has absorbed ideas of narrowness and limitation which are inconsistent with the real nature of the source of all seen and unseen things. The fatherhood of God is embraced in the providing and harmonizing qualities of the divine mind. However, and indeed, all that is good and comforting in the old conceptions applies here. Righteousness. The seers and initiates who have written the world's Bibles have recognized the essential scientificness of unselfishness and sinlessness, and have known that through these qualities alone man could find the life of real mastery and satisfaction. This idea of the wisdom-directed use of all the faculties is included in the word righteousness, which is nothing else than rightness or the scientific adaptation of means to end. Carnal mind. This term is used in the New Testament and in various metaphysical writings of modern times. Carnal mind is a state of consciousness which the race has built up and in which most individuals are still enmeshed. It is wonderfully subtle and persistent, and no man is finally safe from it until he understands it so fully that its claims cannot present themselves to him in any disguise which he will not recognize. Satan is the carnal-minded quality personified, and if we have largely grown away from a belief in a personal devil, it is not because we have grown beyond the possibility of being trapped and brought into great tribulation by that state of consciousness of which the devil is but a symbol. Carnal-mindedness seeks to persuade men that things are good for their own sake, that sensation can satisfy the hunger of the soul for creative expression, and that a man can gain happiness by sacrificing his fellows. Subconscious mind is a modern term. It is the name given to those strata of activity which lie below the threshold of consciousness. Your digestion and the throb of your heart are things which you do not consciously direct, yet it is your life which is expressed in them. This is one phase of subconscious life. Nature is the subconscious stratum extending beyond personality. It may be called the subconscious mind of God. Like the individual subconsciousness, nature accepts and acts upon suggestions strongly offered to her, and if these suggestions are unwise, the results, when they appear, will be unpleasant. We have covered much ground in this chapter and have necessarily put a good deal of information into tabloid form. We have considered the threefold nature of the divine life, have seen that it could be split into wisdom, love, and power. We have considered the nature of love and its far-reaching effects in the body and in the greater organism which is called the universe. In this light, we find that love is the harmonizing element which regulates supply throughout the cosmos. And finally, we have turned the light of these principles upon some of the old beliefs and phrases and have interpreted them from a new point of view. Don't try to force yourself to believe anything. Just be fair and open-minded and do your part when it is explained to you. End of chapter 2. of Health and Power Through Creation by Paul Ellsworth.